welcome to Paint by Blunders. Today I am painting the Ironjawz Brute Rager model, which is one of the new Ironjawz models. Really good sculpts, really enjoyed painting this up. I'm going to do more Ironjawz stuff because they are easily one of my favourite factions. I think they look fantastic. And I've done a take on the Bloodtooth clan, which is traditionally red and yellow, but I've decided to sub out the yellow for black. Yeah, thank you very much for checking out this video. If you're new to what we do here, please, if you enjoy it, give it a subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and hopefully you find something in here useful. And yeah, let's get to it. So welcome back. This is our Brute Rager, and primer wise I've pretty much just given him a grey seer spray, but I did start with a little bit of a dark grey underspray. And the first thing we are going to tackle is this lovely fella's skin. So we're going to be using Nurgling Green as our base and then layer it up with Auric Flesh. If you want to go deeper, start with Dark World Forest as your base, because then you'll get some more deeper tones and build it up from there. If you want to do this quicker, then just use Auric Flesh and don't worry about Nurgling Green. It just depends how fast you want to get your miniatures on the table and how much effort you want to put into the skin. Paint consistency wise, I've added just a touch of water just to help it flow a bit better and just to not look too clogged up on the skin because it is quite smooth. Also, brush size, I'm using a size 2 here. Just use whatever one you feel most comfortable with. As always, the bigger the brush, it holds more paint, so you don't have to keep going back and forth. But just try and get something with a nice tip because there's a few awkward little edges. So with that first colour on the skin, we're going to look at the lovely leather pants that are clinging to his derriere, and we're going to go Rhinox hide for this one. This is one of those places where if you wanted to save a bit of time, you could throw a brown contrast on it, wildwood or something like that. Just depends how much time you want to again spend on the trousers. And with that Rhinox hide on the trousers, we're going to start looking at the metallics now, like the weapon, the chains, and any other little bits and pieces. And we're going to use Vallejo Game Colour Chainmail. I really like this stuff at the minute. I've used it quite a bit. Once again, I'm using a size 2 because I'm lazy and I pretty much use the same brush for everything. One thing to note when doing your metallics, just if you don't have a separate water cup for when you're doing metallics, when you wash your brush off, after you've done this step, I would recommend switching out your water, just because all those little metallic flakes will just sit in it, and then you'll go to put your next colour on, you'll flick it around the light and wonder why it's got a little bit of a sparkly effect. Could be what you're going for, then crack on, but not what I'm going for today. Also, just want to appreciate the sculpt. The size of this hacking stick is unbelievable. And with that big sort of epic, I'm going to jump and swing this down on your head. You do get all 3 weapon options for each Auric. But how could I not have picked this one? Look at the size of the bloody thing. So that's our metallics done. The beauty of these models, I think, and especially with the whole Ironjawz range, is it doesn't have to be too uniform. So if there's any piece of armour that you think you want it to be metallic and scrappy, you can. But anyway, we're going to start working on the red, and we're going to use Mephiston red for all our armour here. Again, equally, you could just throw contrast on this if you wanted to just speed it up a little bit, and that's the look you were going for. And I would also just say there are a few areas just to try and be careful. So again, the biggest brush you feel comfortable with will help you out, but there's a few nooks and crannies where you've got to really push in that red just to try and be a bit careful. And as you can see, I've left the knee pads as what I'm going to have as my accent colour to go with the armour. You could pick anything you like. There's quite a lot of freedom with these to just make each one a little bit unique and just have a bit more fun with it. So with that coat of red down, you may have to go in and do a second coat. Well worth doing, because once we shade the red, that's pretty much it, other than the highlights, but they're normally edges and scratches, so it's worth doing the second coat. But now we're going to start working on the clothy, strappy sections, like of the weapon, the back of the boots, etc. And it's Ragerz Flesh for this one of my favourites. Now some of these bits are really awkward to get to. I would recommend dropping down a brush size just to save on the cleanup. Now that's all done, we're going to go for a very easy win and just pick out the belt in Wildwood. One of the reasons why I do this is obviously to save time, but I try to think of things, one, obviously where I can save time, but where I don't want, like, people's eyes, hopefully, are not drawn to like an incredibly well highlighted belt. So I'm not going to waste too much time on it, because I don't want people to look at it. And if someone picks it up and looks at it and goes, you haven't put much effort into the old belt, have you? Then screw that guy. Also quickly just throwing on some magenta onto his tongue, which then I'll go with the crimson wash and then just call it done, because it's such a small thing, and if you go for the mask option, it's even smaller. So now we're going to start looking at the black sections, and for this I'm just going to use Black Legion. Again, saves me some time, it flows well and covers incredibly well. You could just use any black Abaddon, Vallejo, AK. Some are more superior than others, obviously, but yeah, they will get the job done for this. And I'm just trying to be as careful as I can with this, because it's obviously black. Whatever it touches becomes a bit of a pain to clean up. So with the black done, we're going to start working on some washes now. I'm going to start with the skin, and I'm going to use camo shade for this one. One thing that I did mess up on, and I had this down in my notes, so this is something I can tell you in hindsight. You only really need to shade over the recesses and any of those little creases that you want to define. I put it all over the model, and you really don't have to. It just makes layering a little bit longer. So that is my little tip, lesson learned from when I was doing this. So with that shade drying, or dry, we can move on to the red armor, the pants, the pretty much everything else, really. I like doing this in armies, especially if I'm trying to paint a whole army quickly and try and make a scheme where one shade fits quite a few things at the same time. So out comes the greatest shade of all time, and that's our Ragerz Earthshade. And strangely with this, I'm going against what I would normally do with shades and washes, and that's try to avoid too much pooling. Where they've got quite dank, battle-worn armour, I'm not too fussed about the level of pooling on this. So I'm going to start highlighting up the green skin again with the original base tone, which was Nurgling Green. And yeah, a little bit of water, make it nice and smooth, and we're just going around picking out all of the skin tones again, really, just avoiding the deepest recesses, just to bring it back up before we do the Auric Flesh on top. So when we're adding the Auric Flesh, what I tend to do is just add in a little bit of the base colour to start with, just so it isn't as stark as a transition. So I do go through this step essentially twice, like a 50-50 mix and then a normal mix. So we're going to do the final highlight now, which is Nurgling Green, and it's basically just for his face, tip of the knuckles, and any muscle you really want to make it pop. I'm pretty much just doing lines with this. If you're putting the mask on and having him as one of the weird brutes, then please just avoid doing anything on the face other than the bare basics, because you will never see it. So now we're going to use Screaming Skull to highlight basically anything we did in the Ragerz Flesh, so the teeth, the bandages, the wraps around the handle. I'm not going to go too mad with this because I want it to look dirty, and it's not really anywhere, like I said earlier, where I want the eye to be drawn. So it's just going to be a quick line here and there. One other thing I did off camera is I just put a quick coat of Grosseer over the loincloth. So we're going to come in and start highlighting the armour now. Mephiston Red start, and we're just going to do quite a thick edge highlight on all the red armour pieces and where it's raised, where it looks like it's been panel beaten. We're just going to go around quite rough on this. It will show up, but it's the next highlight that's really going to make it pop. Evil Sun's Scarlet, doing much the same. We're just trying to be a bit sharper with these edge highlights now. Fire Dragon Bright for our final highlight. We will mix it in with the Evil Sun's Scarlet, probably 50-50 approximately. And we're just focusing on like the nice sharp edges of the armour, like the front of the greaves, the corners of the boots. Anything we can get a nice quick line across. So we're going to start highlighting up the trousers again. We're just going to use warm brown, and we're just going to avoid the deepest recesses and pretty much just paint all these trousers. And I really like the way this goes over Rhinox hide. So for the black armour, that we're going to do a first highlight of Thunderhawk Blue. And with this step, it's trying to get those lines as sharp and as neat as you can. But you'll notice that there's a few lines that I do, like this one, that is way thicker than I'd like. But you can easily come back in afterwards and just sharpen them up with the Black Templar or Black Legion, and just either side, and you can just neaten them up that way. Once we've gone round it all, we're going to come straight back in with Fenrisian Grey and do much the same, but we're just picking out the sharper points and the peaks of some of the battered armour. So next I'm going to essentially make almost a heavy glaze and then highlight it back up with white just for that loincloth, and for the glaze as such. I used about 70-30 water to Space Wolves Grey. So it's grime time. I'm going to use some streaking grime, and I'm going to lob it all over the weapon and just the ends of the chains. If you've not used this before, it's like a strange enamel. It's not strange. It's enamel-based paint, so you use white spirit, or you can use alcohol, but it's a bit more offensive to get it away with that. You can pull away your original paint quite easy. But essentially, there's a few ways to use it. I'm using it where I'm coating the entire weapon and the little bits of the chain. And I will come back in like a few minutes after it starts to dry, and I'll start wicking it away with like a Q-tip or cotton bud, or you can use an old paintbrush, and start pulling it away, and it leaves like a residue behind. And the nice thing about it is, if you hate it, you can just essentially you can get it all off with the spirit and start again, or you can just keep adding to it. but you can get some really nice effects with this. So if you don't have any grime and you don't want to get into that world, a similar effect you could do is just water down some rattling grime. I would do that and then just build it up in layers that way. You can just come up with a very similar effect. So we're just going to edge highlight the metal now, and we're going to add some quite abrupt streaks down the blade, so it looks like quite orcish and quite rough around the edges. And this is pretty much the last step. So once you've done this, it's just little personal touches like the eyes, basing however you like. And this is just something I wanted to show. This is how I've done the masks. They're really cool because you can stick them on or you don't have to. And that's the one I chose for this guy, but I tried them all out beforehand. So basing is done. I used AK's Desert Texture paint with a little bit of pigment powder and threw a tuft on. But you can base him any way that suits your army. So let's just have a quick look at the mask. I used all the same techniques that we've done for the rest of it. So the red's exact same as the armour, black, etc. Once again, thank you very much for watching this Paint by Blunders video. And if you enjoyed it and want to see more, please do hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. And I will hopefully see you on the next one. So let's get this guy spinning and give him a little outro.